Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Joined again today with Aliza Hava. Aliza, thanks for joining me today. Great to have you on the show for the second time.
Thank you, Dan. It's awesome to be back.
Yeah,
Really nice
love,
to see your face again.
absolutely. Love having multiple guests, or I guess the same guests on multiple shows. Our last conversation was so good and went so deep. I wanted to have you on again, and just really kind of focus on, we did talk about it a little bit in the first episode, but I really want to dig into the album that you're getting ready to release. But before we get there, just for anybody that didn't listen to the first show that aren't regular listeners, just introduce yourself in your own words. Who is Aliza today?
Okay, well, hi everybody. Hope you're all doing well. It's a Zoom call, so I'm not really sure where I'm looking, if I look straight into the camera or looking at Dan, but I just wanted to say hi. And yeah, I am a singer-songwriter originally from New York and New Jersey, and I've been writing songs since I was 9 years old, writing songs that have been healing for me and also putting a message of love and peace and healing out into the world. That's something that's always been very important to me. And I've got a couple records out, a bunch of singles. The new album that we're talking about today is called Into the Light, and I'm getting ready to release that later this spring, towards the beginning of the summer. And it's all about my personal healing process, overcoming a very violent childhood, which was very difficult. But thankfully, um, I discovered I had a gift with music, and that has helped me transform my life. So, looking forward to sharing it with you and hopefully offering something inspirational to the world.
I love that. I love it. And it is music is such a beautiful gift and such a way to unite people. I love having artists on the show and talking about that because I'm always very envious of your talent. I think I mentioned on the first show we did that I was a bad bass player back in high school. Um, so anybody that can pick up an instrument and make it sound beautiful and sing as well, is just, you have a gift, and I'm glad to see that you're sharing it with the world because it is very special to do that. And there's many people who um, won't allow themselves to do that, even though they have the talent. So thank you for being willing and vulnerable enough to share it with the rest of us.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
No problem. So, boy, since last time we talked, I mean, you've been doing a lot of traveling, putting the finishing touches on the album, getting ready to kick off a Kickstarter. And before we really talk about some of that, um, the music industry in its own right has changed a lot over the past, couple decades. Um, both good and bad. I mean, obviously, years and years ago, if you didn't have a label, um, no one would hear you. Now, being able to be an independent artist and be able to record on your own is great, but then there also are challenges to it. And one of that just, naturally comes the financing of it, where you're carrying that burden. You know, you don't have a big label to foot the bill, so to speak, or front the bill, either, however you want to look at it. But it also creates huge opportunities. So, talk a little bit about some of the, pluses and minuses of, you know, being an independent artist and, how you navigate that.
Sure. Well, I have a lot of experience with this topic because I've been an independent artist my whole life. And in terms of the industry and the streaming platforms and how they've completely altered the state of the industry, um, it really has become on the pro side, it's become much easier for artists to get their music out into the world, where you can record a song in your house on your laptop and then upload it the very next day to multiple sites like Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you stream music. And so that in that way, it's there's like a huge opportunity for artists to be heard. The opposite side of that is that there's a lot of noise out there. There's not a lot of quality control. And in the past, and even today, you have those gatekeepers in the industry who are making sure that the music that's getting out there is really high quality, high level production. I mean, everybody has their own set of standards, and music obviously is subjective. So, people like what they like. So, it's a really wide gamut of pros and cons to the reality of being an independent artist these days. Because when you are trying to push your music as an indie, you're coming up against, I think the latest stat is 100,000 songs that are being uploaded to Spotify every single day.
Every
And
day. That's
every
just so I
day,
just want people to digest that for a second. Like that is just a crazy number that there's 100,000 new songs going up on streaming platforms a day. Like that's just mind blowing to me.
staggering. It's staggering. It used to be like 40,000, like a few years ago, it was 40,000. Now it's 100,000. So, COVID lockdown, everybody built their home studio. So it's become a whole new landscape, whole new frontier. In terms of, backing and financial backing, I think it's different when you're an artist producer who actually can like produce your own music. A lot of people are very handy with recording themselves at home and being able to mix and master. And when you have those skill sets, which take time to develop, and it's a unique talent in and of itself, that's really a benefit because then you can record yourself, add your own instruments, and mix and master, and you don't really have to spend a dime. And then there are artists who that's not necessarily their skill set, and they have to hire a producer, hire other musicians, and but that for me, that's really also like the fun part because that's the collaborative part that makes it really fun and exciting. And so I had the opportunity to produce my record with Mikal Blue out in Thousand Oaks, California, right outside of Los Angeles. And Michael is just such a wonderful human being, a massive talent in terms of his production capacity, but also he's a guitar player, he's a songwriter, he's a singer, he's he's an artist himself. And so collaborating with him and working with his team and the artists that he brought in to work with me, like Dean Dinning from Toad the Wet Sprocket and Greg Bissonette, who's playing drums. Greg is a legend. He's one of the top rock and roll drummers in the world. So that is something I would never be able to experience home alone in my little home studio recording myself. I got to work with these legends and icons and using some of the best gear around. I mean, I didn't know this at the time, but most of the songs that I recorded, I played piano on those songs in the studio and only found out after the fact that that was the piano that was used to record Fleetwood Mac's Rumors
Wow.
because Michael was business partners at the time with Ken Caillat, who produced Rumors. So that piano was in the studio, and that's the one I recorded on. So those kinds of experiences are once in a lifetime, and so yeah. But of course, I had to back myself to make that happen. And the benefit of that too is that I own all of my own masters, right? So I have exclusive control over how my music gets used. I don't have a label telling me to, you know, how to exploit. That's the legal term for promoting your music. Funny legal term there. Um, yeah, how to basically market and push my music into the world. So I do have creative control and license over how I share that music and how it's used and distributed. So that's also a benefit of being independent. But again, I'm open to collaboration, and if I were to find a wonderful label that I had a good rapport with, I'm definitely open to that because, you know, you need a team. You really need a team to go as far as you can. You really can't do it on your own. And yeah,
Yeah.
you
And
can try.
yeah, and that's music or anything in life, like
Right.
oftentimes you hear the term of people saying, "Oh, this guy here, this lady here, she's a self-made millionaire," so that's not the case. Like that is a complete BS story. Anybody who says they're self-made anything, because it's just not the case. You need a whole team of support staff around you, and people to look up to as well, you know. Um, but you talked about some of the other musicians that you worked on in this project. Is there a time like when you first walk into the room where you're a little bit starstruck and a little bit in awe? And then when you're talking about the piano, like I remember when we were in Memphis, we did a tour of the Sun Studios, which is still an active studio. And, you know, apart from Elvis and Johnny Cash and all these legends, like U2 recorded there as well, and stuff like that. And we went to the Stax Records Museum, and again, just kind of like, to me, it's like almost hallowed ground. So do you get, you know, because you're a fan of music, but you're an artist as well. So that balancing act of when you're in the room of people who are, you know, legends in their own rights, and then understanding that you belong, like, what is that like for you?
Well, that's a great question. And first, because you mentioned Sun Studios in Memphis, I just want to say that the studio that I recorded in Thousand Oaks, it's called Revolver. But the room that we recorded in was actually called Memphis because it had the original wood from Sun Studios that Elvis, in the studio that Elvis recorded in, had been transported when they remodeled Sun Studios. They brought it to California, and that's the wood, and there's like a ray of light, sunshine made out of stained wood covering the control, the you'll when you're in the room, the live room, and you see the glass for the control room, the wood from Sun Studios was right over that, and it was
That is
a
so cool.
rays of light. So Michael named that room Memphis. So I
That's
just think
cool.
it's so coincidental that you brought that up. That's really cool, serendipitous that you brought that up because that was my favorite room to work in at the
That's cool.
studio.
So
Yeah.
cool.
But in terms of like getting starstruck, I would say I've spent a lot of years on the road and I've worked with a lot of major names, a lot of world-class musicians. So, I've had experiences to meet legends. I've met Kevin Costner. I've met the guys from Cheap Trick, the guys from Deep Purple, the guys from Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots, and so I've jammed with these guys, and they're just, they're really people. And I think the older I get, the more I realize, if I was like a teenager, really young, just starting out, I think, maybe I was like more nervous back then, but I think as you become more of a seasoned professional and you have these experiences, you realize like these are just people, I'm not running up to them and being like, let me get a selfie with you. Um, I had the opportunity to hang out with Greg Allman many years ago
Oh,
in
wow.
New Orleans, and I had to ask myself, should I try and get a selfie with him or just be cool? Just be cool. And I just decided to be cool. I didn't want to be that person that was trying to get that selfie, because I wanted to feel more of like a peer, Not that I was anywhere on the level of Greg Allman to be honest, but I just wanted to be in the room as a colleague, a peer, fellow musician, and not a fangirl. So making the record, it felt very natural to be in the room with those guys and really fun. They were so fun to work with. Everybody had a great sense of humor. So we were cracking jokes the whole time, even though the content of the record, some of the songs were kind of heavy. Um, we had such a blast. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I can imagine. And like you said, I mean, you get into those situations, and when you start jamming, at the end of the day, you realize that, you know, they are just like you at that point. You know, they're just guys and girls that just love music, and love the feeling they get while, you know, while they're playing it. Um, you know, I just, you know, we're out here in Arizona right now, and I just got together with a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in 35 years, and he plays guitar, and I do still mess with the harmonica at times. And um, you know, on Easter night we were over at his house, and we were just, you know, just playing the harmonica and playing the guitar, and you know, it just was fun. You know, it's just such a cool feeling, even though he is such a better musician than I'll you know, ever hope to be. But you get into that setting and it's just so cool. So I know one of the things we talked about on the last show a little bit as well was the fact that this album that you're releasing here is really a project that is best listened to, from beginning to end in its entirety, something that we don't do a lot of nowadays with streaming. And, um, I believe you're even going to, you know, release a song leading up to the full package. But, you know, when you're working on something like that is literally a project in its entirety, how does that work differently from, just releasing a song, which again is something that with the technology, you never heard of artists just releasing a song between two album projects, when you and I were kids. It just didn't happen. It was always, the album came out and then here's the first single of the album. So, how does it differ working on just a song compared to a a body of work?
Well, that's a great question. I have written many songs that don't necessarily lend themselves to a full thematic album. And at the same time, having a theme to an album, I think, is very powerful because, when you're trying to connect with people, it's really a body of work that makes a difference in really, finding the people that really value what you do and your voice and your unique perspective. Um, releasing one song a month, which is kind of what artists are encouraged to do these days, release a new song every 4 to 6 weeks, to get that traction. And that, by the way, goes back to what we're talking about, the independent artists and how the music industry has changed because it used to be where artists would take a year or 2 years to write and record an album, and there would be a release cycle between the albums. And the major artists still do that today because they have the I would say the luxury to some degree of being able to have that time to write and record. The emerging artists have to, they're like, we're encouraged to be slaves to the algorithm, which is really a problem. It's really a problem
Yeah,
because the creative process gets completely shifted around where it's like, okay, you put one song out, you push it, and then boom, do the next one, do the next one. And there's a release cycle and it's all about, the social media strategy and your stories and your reels and your TikToks and your shorts. It's not even about the music anymore. You could put 15 seconds on a reel and it can go viral. And that's all people know of your music. And all of a sudden the major labels are like, oh yeah, we'll sign you because you got whatever, a million hits on that 15 seconds. Can that artist produce that again? Are those real fans? I mean,
right.
the way that music is consumed these days, I find it to be challenging and problematic. But that being said, it also means that you're exposed to so many more different artists. So you can find the kind of music that you really love that resonates with you. And then it's up to the listener to decide if they want to do a deep dive on that music. And I'm more old school. I've always been old school. Even when I was a kid, I was old school. I was listening to Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. I was listening to like, classic rock and soul music from the 50s and 60s when I was like, 10, 11, 12 years old. So, I was also listening to like, modern music at that time, but I've always been a throwback. And so my nature and my style, it's very organic, it's very acoustic, it's very instrument led. I'm playing guitar, I'm playing piano. I don't use a lot of electronic instruments in my music. It's very organic, like I said. And in terms of an entire album and a theme around an entire album, um, in particular, this project for me has been an important process because it's been my own form of music therapy. And I was writing about my healing process and my healing journey, which has taken place over a number of years, over a few decades, really. And so, how do you capture each aspect of the healing journey and those insights that you have at different times and be able to fuse that into a story, which in this case is the 10 songs on the record, And I'm still writing. I'm still going to write new songs and things, that I'm learning as I go, because that's what artists do. We always evolve and grow and see the world in new ways. But I think in particular, this album was my healing process kind of put onto wax, so to speak, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're in the studio, um, is there ever an instance where something didn't turn out the way that you initially envisioned it to turn out, and not in a bad way, but in a good way because of other collaborative input that's taken place in the studio? Or is it pretty much by the time you get to the studio, you're pretty well dead set on how you want the finished product to look or sound?
Well, I think it's always going to be a process, right? Because you're bringing different people to the table to help produce it. And really, what you want is a producer who gets you and gets your sound and can like bring that to life. So in this case, I mean, in the past, I have definitely had producers who did not get me, who pushed me around, who told me, who were bullies, and I think a lot of women have experienced that, to be honest, in the music business, young people, inexperienced people, producers kind of knocking them around saying, no, it has to be like this. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. I've experienced that. I mostly in my early 20s, you know. I learned some big lessons there. I would say making this record was a completely different experience because I had such a great connection with Michael, the producer. Um, and it was also very personal music, right? I'm writing the most personal songs I've ever written. And because he's such a genuine person and such a good human being, he was able to create an environment where I felt very safe and very comfortable being myself, being able to express myself through my singing, but also being able to say to him, hey, I'm not sure that's working. Let's try this. I'd really love to hear this. Oh, that drum beat, and Greg was great to work with too, because Greg was asking me for ideas as he was doing the drum parts. He's like, what do you want to do here? And I'm a drummer. I've been drumming since I was 16. Mostly hand drums, percussion, djembe, darbuka, Middle Eastern and African drums. I started playing the kit when I was, I don't know, 23 or 24, but I never had my own kit until just a couple of years ago, so I never really practiced. But being able to like rock out on the kit, I was able to tell Greg, hey, I'm hearing this. Can you try that? And then he'd be like, oh, that works really well. Right on. So that was also very awesome and fun and validating to have, this legendary drummer be like, great idea. That kicks ass. You
Yeah.
know, that feels really good. Um, so again, it's a collaboration. But if I ever were to hear something that wasn't feeling right, I could obviously say it. And also there's a trust that happens, between me and the producer, me and the other musicians in the studio, the other session musicians. Like had a great guitarist named Dalton Cyr, CYR is his last name. I think he pronounced it Sire. Dalton is just another awesome musician, vocalist, bass player, piano player, guitar player who played a lot of instruments on this record. And he was great to work with. The guy's a genius. I mean, everything that he did was like perfect. I didn't really have to ask for much. He just nailed it. He pretty much nailed it every time. I was like, okay. There's like an inside joke at the studio about like how he's done it again. He's done it again, folks. He just goes in, lays down like one track, two tracks, done.
I
Really
love it.
amazing musician. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So the the difference between the studio process and performing live then are most of your shows with a band or just you or a mixture? And just what's the difference between, you know, again, that creativity in the studio and then the creativity on stage?
Great question. So, in the studio, you're working with people who are seasoned session musicians, right? So they play on hundreds of records and they know how to work in the studio with, with the headphones and the nuances of recording, tension and release and how to capture that on a microphone. So that's a different art unto itself. Performing live, it's very different because you got to put on a show. All right. You got to connect with the audience. There are people in the room looking at you and they want to feel connected to you. So it's an entirely different experience, right? And also you're feeding the audience with your music and they're feeding you back with their attention and their, if they like you, hopefully they'll clap or, send some hoots and hollers your way, which makes you feel heard and seen and appreciated. And then it becomes a symbiotic experience between the artist and the audience. Um, Generally, I have played solo for most of my life because I travel a lot and it's very easy for me to just jump on a plane with my guitar, go somewhere and rock out and do a 2.5 hour set by myself. And I've done that for many years. I've also started playing piano in recent years at my shows, which is also new for me to perform on piano. Even though I've been playing since I was a kid, I had a very long time when I didn't play the piano. And then during lockdown, I started playing again, which was great. Um, I performed the songs from this album earlier this year at a showcase in New York City. And I hired a band in New York City to work with me. And we had two rehearsals and then played the whole record.
Wow.
And so, yeah. So again, like these are artists, musicians who are playing in numerous projects and they know how to read charts. They know how to take direction. They hear the music, they learn it, they show up, boom, boom, we knock it out and we play it. Now, a seasoned, a seasoned musician who is, we call it a pickup band, right? You go to a different city, you can hire a different band in different cities, different artists, musicians, different locations. You're going to find different people each time have, some have stronger skill sets than others. And if you're hiring different musicians, you don't always know that they're going to hit it off and gel, right? I wish I had an epic band that could tour with me around the world. I mean, that's definitely a vision and a goal that I have for like the next few months and years is to build that. But again, as an independent artist, that's a hefty price tag for that because you've got to pay everybody for their time, for their rehearsal time, for their travel and parking and food. You want to treat people right. And obviously for the gig. So, but yeah, it's when you're a solo artist writing your own material, you're responsible for that cost. However, if you're a band writing together, like U2 or Rolling Stones. I mean, everybody's a part of that. I'm not sure what their songwriter splits and credits look like, but usually bands like that, where everybody's a part of it, everybody's contributing to that.
Right.
Um, so it's a different dynamic when you have that kind of band. But yeah, as a solo artist, you're responsible for hiring the band and taking care of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about um, doing a showcase in New York where you performed all the songs on the album. And you mentioned multiple times that, this album was very personal to you and so there was a certain vibe in the studio, to allow yourself to express that and be vulnerable. To do all those songs live, again, when people are, staring at you and, trying to feel your vibe with those songs being so personal to you, what was that experience like?
Well, luckily, it was awesome. I played it at Rockwood Music Hall, which is in downtown Manhattan on the Lower East Side. And because I'm from New York, I had, following, also friends in New York, like people who care about me, people who know me for years. And it's a small room. So, I think there was probably it's a small room. I think it holds 75 people. It was standing room only, which was nice. And there was a lot of love there because these are people who know my story. Some of them never heard me before, ever, never even heard of me, just happened to walk in, or heard about my showcase through the promotion at the conference that I was at. Um, so there was definitely a lot of love in the room. Um, People were very receptive. People who knew me but didn't really know my music were very, I would say, moved. People who hadn't heard me play in years were like, whoa, this is a whole other level for you, which I know it is because, again, it's just taken it to a deeper level with this writing and with the piano. Um, and also, there was a gentleman there who I'd never met before who heard about the show, who came over to me and said, that the songs had touched him in such a deep way, it made him remember things about his own childhood that he had kind of buried and forgotten. And it was bringing up things for him that made him realize how much healing work that he needed to do and that it was revelatory for him and deeply moving. And he wrote about it on his blog and sent me the article. And, that's to me, that's the most validating piece because the album's called Into the Light, and it's about bringing things out of the darkness and into the light, things that might be hidden in the shadows that are still affecting us subconsciously, that are hurting us, that we don't even realize are hurting us because we buried them so deep down. The only way you can heal it is to bring it out. And that's what he said happened to him just sitting there listening.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, boom, it's working.
That's powerful, and it's got to be very validating. And I know we talked about this a little bit on the last show, but when you kind of strike that chord with the listener, where they almost feel as though you're singing their story.
Mm,
Um, I mean, that's a special place for to go as an artist. I mean, because I even know, just if I get an email or a message about something I wrote, in a book or on a blog or something that, somebody talks about how it really resonated with them, it really does give you that, validation because it's not, with this project, you were doing it for yourself, but you were also hoping to help heal others throughout your healing process too. So I can imagine that validation had to just been, you know, so incredibly uplifting for you.
it really was. I mean, I've heard it from a few people. Um, like from the live performances. I did a live stream from Revolver while we were recording the album, and I shared some of those songs. And there were two women in the studio who I'd never met. They had come as guests of some of the other folks there, and they came over to me afterwards, and they were very emotional. They were sisters, and they were in their 50s, I think. They were twins, and they told me that they had also had very abusive parents, childhood violent homes, and that when I was singing, and this came from them, specifically one of the women, I forget her name because it was just such a short interaction, but it was so meaningful. She said that she felt like the pain and the trauma was like lifting off of her body as she heard me singing.
Wow.
Yeah. I
Wow.
mean,
It's incredible.
that's what transmutation is. That is like a true alchemical process where you take something painful and you turn into something beautiful and then it releases
Yeah.
and it heals. And that's how this music has affected me when I wrote it and also when I sang it. It's like its own form of magic.
Yeah. Yeah. It always is. Music is magical in its own right. And so there's some times where you really get the right recipe and it becomes very special. So we're getting ready to kick off the Kickstarter here. Album will be out about two and a half months after this show is released. Um, and I'm assuming there's going to be a tour after that. Is that correct?
I'm working on setting up a tour now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and will that be a band tour or that's going to be you solo again?
It'll likely be solo and then picking up musicians in different cities.
Yeah. So when you're laying out the tour again as a, independent artist where you're doing, you know, the bulk of the heavy lifting, if not all of it, um, you know, how are you laying that tour out, to not completely burn yourself out and um, make the most of, the shows you're playing.
Well, it's really helpful to do like regional tours, right? So to choose a location where you can do 2 to 3 weeks, then take a pause, do another 2 to 3 weeks, take a pause, do another, you know. So I'm looking at the Pacific Northwest, Canada. I mean, Canada is huge. Um, Ideally, what I'd like to do is start up in Oregon, where I live, work down towards Los Angeles, cut across to Austin, New Mexico, New Orleans, go across to Nashville, come up through North Carolina, hit Asheville, end up in tri-state area, up to Maine, where I have a bunch of people out there who are big fans. And then, you know, ideally it would be really cool to drive back across Canada and do gigs. But Canada's huge. I've driven across it once. It's massive and there's a lot of in between. But, you know, having some house concerts and then other like theater concerts combined, that's a really nice blend.
Yeah.
I also have an opportunity to go to Europe later this summer. I have invitations to perform at two different festivals. So I'm also considering, going straight to Europe after I finish the campaign there. And then I have a booking agent in Switzerland who's working with me to book some shows across Europe. So I would probably I'm still locking these things in, but that's the current thought process I've got
Yeah.
going on.
Then how
Yeah.
how are you traveling when you're on tour?
In the States,
Yeah.
by car. By car, I've got a nice trusty little Kia Soul, which I love.
Wow.
I've driven it up to Canada, down to Arizona, up back and forth between Los Angeles and Oregon numerous times. It's pretty reliable and it can carry quite a bit of gear.
Uh,
So
I'm impressed that it can carry as much gear as you're as you're hauling around. I would have thought for sure you were in a little van or something, but I guess those Souls are kind of a mix between a station wagon SUV, something or
yeah,
another like that.
it's a
So
mini SUV. You'd be surprised.
yeah,
I could fit a couple guitars, a PA, keyboard, and my personal gear items.
yeah,
So
very cool. So
yeah.
you're getting a unique vantage point of traveling as we do. Um, and going across the states and seeing the different landscapes and stuff like that. Like what as a guy who's traveling all the time and absolutely loves that part of traveling, like the drive for me is just there's just an incredible serenity in it for me, and I absolutely love it. So what's that like for you on that drive between gigs when you're touring by yourself?
Well, I really love driving. It's very soothing for me. Um, and it's interesting because I recently heard another artist, a singer-songwriter, interviewed about this, and it was asked the same question, like, what's it like when you tour? Are you traveling with a band? Are you traveling by yourself? And and what he said was exactly my same feeling. He says he usually drives in silence, you know, and this way he can think. And I'm the same way. Like I barely listen to music when I drive. I'll sit in silence for like 4 hours and
Wow.
love it and really love it. And sometimes I'll get a phone call or I'll make a call and that's nice because then I could talk to an old friend and catch up, which is also really nice because you can't always do that when you're just like at home or working. You just got too much going on to be able to have a long chat with someone.
Yeah,
But when you're on the road for 4 hours, an hour and a half phone call can go by like that. And, your bestie from high school, you get caught up pretty quick. So that's always a nice thing. Um, but yeah, I love to drive and I actually write a lot of music while I drive. I get ideas that come to me and I'll record them on my phone. I've probably got like 1,000 voice memos that I've never listened to, but I know there's gold in there. Like if I were to like sit down and when I'm ready to make my next record, I'll go through those and I'll pick out those ideas and develop them more.
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I always have to have music playing. I do, um, you know, whenever we're driving, there's always, you know, a soundtrack for sure. So, but yeah, I mean, the drive can be so peaceful, whether it's silent or, you know, with a soundtrack in the background. It's incredible. Um, so once you get this album out there, and I mean, it sounds like with what you're doing, um, what you're looking to do touring wise. I mean, how long will you be touring? And are you taking breaks in between some of those regions where you're going back home to kind of decompress a little bit, or you're just going to hit the whole thing at once?
I'm not entirely sure yet how it's all going to work out, but I'm anticipating being on the road for probably 2 months at a time, 2 to 3 months at a time. And I've done that before and loved it. So, I think as long as there's some downtime in there, here and there, a few nights off, it's definitely manageable.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah,
Well, so
yeah.
as we're recording this, you're actually in Austin, Texas right now, and you've been down there a couple times since our first show. Tell me a little bit about, you know, what you're doing on these couple trips to Austin.
Sure. Well, I came in March for South by Southwest. I was performing a showcase, and that was awesome. Went really well. And I met up with some of the folks that I'd met in Kansas City at Folk Alliance, which is a conference that happens every year, an annual conference that brings together folk musicians, singer-songwriters from all over the world. And it's an excellent experience. It's an industry conference, so it's not really for fans, but more for musicians, agents, managers, booking agents, presenters, etc. So I'd been there in February and made some really great connections, and some of those folks were here in Austin. So um, met up with them in Austin, went to a bunch of concerts, started meeting a ton of local artists. And essentially, when I was in Kansas City, it was around International Women's Day, and I was invited to perform at a house concert there. And my host had heard me perform the song called "Arise, Women of This Day," which is a peace anthem that's based on the words of the Mother's Day Proclamation by Julia Ward Howe. And she was a Civil War abolitionist and a suffragist who worked for the right of women to vote. And a lot of people don't know this, but the origins of Mother's Day came from her document, the Mother's Day Proclamation, which was calling for women around the world to come together for a day of peace so that they could discuss how their sons and husbands would stop going off to war and killing each other.
Wow.
And then, yeah. And then decades later, Anna Jarvis appealed to Woodrow Wilson to turn Mother's Day into a national holiday. And her mother was friends with Julia Ward Howe. They worked together. So this was the document that inspired the creation of Mother's Day, most people don't know that it was never intended to be a Hallmark holiday, but it was meant to be a day of peace for
Well,
women to come together and work together to, protect their loved ones and future generations. So I sang that song and then, you know, was encouraged to record it, came to Austin, met a wonderful band called the West Texas Exiles. They're this up and coming, I would call them like a country rock, folk rock band. They're awesome. And they're just the nicest guys. And their bass player, his name's Eric Harrison. Eric has a recording studio. He's also a music producer. And so we met up and talked about finishing the song at his studio. And in terms of the timing, we figured it out. And I realized, okay, I can record this in time for Mother's Day this year and put it out. Mother's Day is May 12th. So by the time this podcast comes out, that song will be out with a little behind the scenes music video of us in the studio, which is going to be really cool.
that's
And then
cool.
Eric has invited some local artists and another band, an oud player from a band that I met out here called Atlas Mayer. Um, so we have Josh Peters on oud, and then we have some of the women from a band called Madame Radar coming out. Kelly and Violet, they're really like beloved artists here in Austin. So I just feel very fortunate to have auspiciously found these amazing people in the timing that I did. It just feels very serendipitous and it's exciting. And I hope that the song has an impact um, to inspire women to do something,
Yeah,
you know.
it's awesome. And don't you love it when something like that comes together where, you took that first trip to Austin, you took the trip to Kansas City, um, and as it all came together, it just totally exceeded your expectations and went, above and beyond what you thought those trips were initially for.
Completely, completely true.
It's
Yeah.
so amazing. And it's, you know, so many times in life, stuff like that happens. And, uh, sometimes you recognize it in the moment. Sometimes it takes a month or even years before you look back on it and be like, ah, that's why I was there at that time, you know, and it is really, really cool. And makes you understand that, as we go throughout life, like, nothing ever really does happen by chance, like there really is a reason for every person we ever interact with. And again, we may not know it at the time, but there is something going on there.
That's words of wisdom.
So,
Yeah.
so is there anything we missed that you think would be important to the listeners? Anything you want to talk about, specifics to the Kickstarter before we wrap things up? What can they expect? I don't know if you've got the levels figured out yet, or if we're just going to drop that link in the show notes and let them go on and dig into how they can help you get this thing out there to the world.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that. I'm actually going to be using a platform called Seed and Spark, which is a little bit different than Kickstarter. And it's a really cool platform. It works essentially the same way. It's just got a little bit of a different way of approaching it, but it's pretty much the same thing where you have your perks and you have your storytelling and everything. So yeah, I'll be offering lots of different things. Obviously the download, the CD, the vinyl, depending on what you're into. Um, Other kinds of merchandise and house concerts, original songs that I can write for you, um, cameo type things, and still getting creative input on what exactly I want to offer, but definitely going to be some cool and interesting and unique stuff available. And yeah, no, it's exciting and it's also it's also taking a risk, I'm putting myself out there
Right.
again. Um, and at the same time, artists really wouldn't have a chance without their fans and their audience supporting them. And that doesn't matter if you're indie or major. Major artists are also relying on their fans. It's just that they have that, intermediary, that label that's kind
Right.
of doing all the heavy lifting for them, in terms of the business aspects. So, in this case, I'm doing most of it myself. I have a little help, some folks that I'm going to be working with. In fact, I've put a team together of really wonderful friends, who are going to be helping me to promote it. So that I'm really grateful for. I've got my little soul family, helping me to spread the campaign far and wide. So I'm really grateful for them. I do want to say that, because I did not anticipate having so much help come to the table. So in that way, I'm really grateful. And yeah. Um, I guess I just want to, give a shout out to all the people who've been involved in the making of the record. Mikal Blue, Dean Dinning, Alex Leibowitz, Greg Bissonette, Dalton Sir, and had a woman named Giovanna Clayton play on the cello, and my friend Jason Perno from college, he played guitar. And there's just been a lot of amazing people involved with this. Also, my co-writers on a few of the songs, Alan Roy Scott and Marla Rubenstein, they're really special, special people. And yeah, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful to just be able to do this, to have a voice and be able to use it. Super grateful.
Awesome. So,
Yeah.
Aliza, how do people find you on the internet, find out more about the campaign? I'm sure there's links on your website, but how do they reach out and, dig into some of your music? I mentioned, before, anybody who hasn't heard of you, go and find her stuff on whatever platform you use, because incredible talent here, and just some incredibly good songs that are gonna make you go down all the different paths of emotions.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Well, I am on all the things, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube. I have a bunch of music videos. And my website is alizahava.com. So it's ALIZAHAVA.com. And on all the socials, I'm Aliza Hava Music. So if you follow me, I would be so appreciative. You can also sign up for my mailing list, so you're getting all the cool behind the scenes stuff. I'm on Bands in Town and Songkick, so you can find out when I'm touring in your area. And also, the campaign is going to be available at intothelightmusic.com. So that's where you'll be able to see the campaign itself and hopefully contribute. And for anyone who does that, I'm just super grateful and excited for you to be part of this journey.
Awesome. All right, Lisa. So that brings us to our final question. Even though I asked it to you before, I still do it even when I have people on the show multiple times. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is "Many Little People in Many Little Places" from Michael Frante's song "Gloria," and those lyrics go, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes." So it's one of the little things that Elisa's doing on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
I am doing self-hypnosis. Self-hypnosis. I highly recommend it. We were talking before about the subconscious mind. And when your subconscious mind is, um, when it has a history of being exposed to negativity, abuse, and negative patterning, negative self-talk, things like that, which are very common, and people have experienced the kind of things that I went through. I find that self-hypnosis is very helpful for repatterning and reprogramming my brain so that I can be more positive, optimistic, happier, kinder, and more loving. And that is the person that I want to be every day. And I feel like by treating people the way I want to be treated, it helps to spread that out into the world. So, I do believe that world peace begins with each and every one of us. And how you treat yourself and how you talk to yourself is a big part of that. So that is one of the things I try to do every day to, you know, just be a better person.
I love it. I love it. Aliza, thanks so much for joining me today. Always love getting together and chatting with you. I have a feeling we may do some more shows in the future as we continue down this journey. For those out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of one of my books. Again, Aliza, thank you so much. I wish you the best in this new album. I'm sure it's going to make a real impact.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for having me, and really appreciate you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. Have a great day.
Thank you.